Oh, hello everyone. Welcome back to the Summer of Access webinar series. Really excited about today's presentation. This PDF looked easy until I opened the tag tree, and it's brought to you by Latoile Education and the Accessibility L&D community, Learning and Development community. And just a couple of reminders that we are in a Zoom meeting, not a Zoom webinar, which that means that please stay muted unless you're speaking. We do have the ability to use the chat or raise hand feature. Recordings are shared in the Accessibility L&D Slack community. Live captions and transcripts are available throughout the presentation, and we will be sharing the slides after today. We're just going to get those out with the recording. So welcome. I am very, very excited to welcome our presenter, Angelina Smith, CPACC and ADS Trusted Tester Digital Accessibility Specialist with Bridgeway Access. Angelina is the founder of Bridgeway Access and a CPACC, ADS, and Tested Justified. So I'm just repeating myself. Sorry, certified accessibility specialist. She specializes in document accessibility, remediation, and training. She also partnered with organizations across sectors to create more inclusive digital content and workflow. Angelina is especially passionate about helping others build confidence and accessibility and apply it in their everyday work and become advocates themselves. I've had the pleasure of partnering and working with Angelina on a project. We partnered up together and it was fantastic. So I recommend working with Angelina anytime in the future if you have a project that you're looking for in a document specialist. So please join me in welcoming Angela to the Summer of Access. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. Oh, I almost ended the meeting. Whoa. Would have been bad. Okay. Oh, stopping my share. Okay, you're all set, Angelina.
Full share screen. Is that working? Is everybody able to see my cover slide title? Perfect. Okay, awesome. Uh, Hello, everyone. I'm Angelina, like Nicole said, and today's session is called This PDF Looked Easy Until I Opened the Tag Tree. And I want to start with a document that completely fooled me. And also, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to come off mute or raise your hand or drop them in chat. I want this to feel like a conversation and get your feedback as well. So before I jump in, I'd love to have you all take a quick poll and make sure I'm kind of presenting this in the most understandable manner. So the question I'm asking you all is, which best describes your experience with document remediation? So A, I'm new to it. B, I do this regularly. Or C, I scope or manage the work, but I don't actually do the remediation. Let's see. Try to pull up the chat. Okay, got A, B. Okay, everybody's like across the board. We have lots of people who do this regularly, um, some that are new to it, and a few people who manage the workflow. Okay, that's good. Great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I think because we have such a wide array of experiences with document remediation, I'm going to define some of the terms that I'm going to be using. So a few of them. The first one is I'm going to talk about tags or the tag tree, and that is the hidden structural layer of a PDF that assistive technology reads. So every PDF has two layers. The one that you can see with the content on it, and then there's like a hidden outline underneath. So tags are what assistive technology actually reads. It's not necessarily the words on the page is what assistive technology is reading, and it tells a screen reader what each part is. So this is a heading, this is a paragraph, this is an image. So I typically equate it to a PDF's code. The second term I'm going to be using is source file. So this is the original file that your PDF came from. That could be in Word, PowerPoint, InDesign. It's the version of the document that you can freely edit. Another term I'm going to be using today is real text. And what I mean by real text is text that you can select and copy. And then on the flip side, I'm going to talk about images of text, and that's like a flat image of words. So that's just kind of, level setting, some of the terms I'll be using frequently, but let's get into it. So this is the document that's traumatized me and kind of started this whole presentation. So I opened a PDF that at first glance looked pretty simple. And on the screen, I have a reproduction of that PDF. I had to reproduce it because I wanted to remove some of the client's name and their information, but it looked like this. It was mostly body text, one banner image, nothing unusual. It's the kind of file where I assumed this was going to be a pretty quick win. And you kind of know what they say about assuming. But, anyways, I was asked to take a look at 10 files. The project was just for me to remediate 10 of their high priority files. And 8 of them looked exactly like this. And so I gave my estimate to the PM on the project on how long I thought it was going to take me to complete. And then we created a proposal around that. So how I had originally scanned it and how I had typically scanned PDFs and kind of scoped level of effort was a quick scan through the pages to see what type of content there was. I'd click around the tag tree to spot check and make sure content was being mapped properly. So in this case, I opened the tags. So this is that code that's underneath the surface of that document I just showed you on the previous slide. So I clicked on a paragraph tag and it correctly mapped to the body text on the page. I clicked the heading 1 tag and it mapped to the heading 1 on the page. And then I clicked another paragraph tag and that correctly mapped to other body text. So I still thought that this was going to be a pretty straightforward fix. Several days later, as in the SpongeBob meme. So fast forward, the document remediation phase was starting probably a month later, and I began my remediation work. I reopened that document, and about a couple minutes in, things felt off. I opened all the tags, expanded everything, and then realized the text wasn't actually real text. They were images of text sitting inside the paragraph tags. So on the screen, I have a screenshot of, I see reactions of shocked faces, and that was exactly my reaction too. I opened it up. On the screen, I have the tag tree. You open up the paragraph tag, and there are image pads inside, span pads inside a paragraph. So all of this to say, for those of you who are new to this, what I thought was real text was not. And so kind of changed everything. So in an instant, what I thought was going to be a straightforward remediation became a very different project. Now I wasn't just fixing tags, I was dealing with optimal character recognition, which I'll define later, but it's also known as OCR, potentially recreating content and rethinking my estimate from the ground up. Something I thought would take me personally, with my experience, 15, 20 minutes for a 2-page PDF ended up taking me about an hour and a half. I had misjudged it because I was relying on a quick scan of content that was there and what I saw instead of taking a deeper look under the surface. So it boils down to the fact that visual simplicity does not equal structural simplicity. And this misconception isn't rare. It happens all the time in document accessibility. We tend to judge effort by what we see or what type of content is there, but accessibility effort doesn't just live on the surface. And as someone who has created and led training programs, teaching clients on how to create accessible documents, one of the biggest gaps that I notice is that clients, yes, are often taught how to identify, how to fix, how to do the technical stuff, how to create an accessible document, maybe in the source, but we often don't teach how to teach participants how to scope and determine the level of effort that's going to be needed. And so this leads to one of the biggest patterns that I've seen, which is that we consistently underestimate accessibility effort. And this happens across the board. It's not just with documents, it happens with accessibility audits and evaluations, it happens in procurement and building long lasting, mature programs. But in the case of documents, I think we consistently underestimate effort because we're looking at the wrong signals. We're looking at things like page count or layout, visual simplicity, but unfortunately, those don't tell you what's actually going on underneath. So I'm going to take a pause here and I'd love to ask a question. So if anybody wants to come off of mute, I'm also popping this question into the chat, but has this happened to anyone else? Doesn't have to be in the document space, but where did scope creep happen when you thought something was going to take you a little bit of time and then it took you, 2, 3 times the amount that you thought it was going to be? And I'd love to hear your stories. What happened? What tipped you off? And how do you approach things now? Yeah, just going to read some of the stuff in chat if that's okay. But PDFs are notoriously a huge pain. um, yeah, Nicole and I had an issue on our project where we realized the font was a custom font and it wasn't coming over. And so we wanted to keep the customer's branding from a source file. And so we did a little bit of rework. Oh, yeah, I hate that sometimes when things just disappear and Adobe crashes on you. That happens so often. Oh, yeah. If anybody wants to come off mute and just share their story, I would love to hear it if you're in a scenario or environment where you can.
Weston.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I'm new to document remediation, and I've been working on this form that's in a PDF. So I mentioned in the chat that I had some trouble. I would try to reorder the reading order, and when I would change the order, it would auto update and it would change the order again and again. And there were some other issues, but my colleague who knows more about document remediation basically suggested that I recreate it in Word because Word has a better accessibility checker. That was problematic because I used some radio buttons and I wanted to reuse those in Word, but then when I was finally able to turn on the ActiveX controls in Word, um, I can't send the document to people because it's flagging it as like a corrupted file or dangerous in some way. So it's just been really frustrating, kind of going back and forth between Word and PDF and trying to remediate both.
Yeah, yeah. Just seeing all of your pain comments in the chat. There's just so many different factors that play into it, and like you said, sometimes it's like, okay, it might be best to go to the source file, but certain form fields, it's better to add them in PDF and kind of knowing like at what point am I supposed to do what, right? And then minimize the level of effort so that I'm not having to, do it here and do it here in two different programs. That's a great. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, double check the chat real fast. Okay.
Hi, Angelina. This is Carolyn. Could I share something?
Yes, absolutely.
Hi. I was remediating some old PDFs. We don't have the source files, of course. That would have made it too easy. And I was remediating a table of contents that had like 30 entries, which is already way too long. And it was, I expected it to be easy. Everything was aligned. I thought it had been created properly in Word. And then when I looked at the tags, there basically weren't any tags. And I thought, what is this? What is happening here? It was a scan. Just that one page was a scan. So, which was okay. I could use OCR on it, but it was, there were no leaders. So there were no lines going across connecting a heading essentially to a page number. So when it scanned, it went by column instead of by row. So then I had to use the reading order tool to hand select every row to make it its own unit. And then, of course, there was no hyperlinks in it because um, it was a scan. So just the table of contents alone made me want to cry. But eventually, it got handled. But I was not expecting just randomly one page to be a scan.
Yeah. And then
It
you
looked
find out,
okay,
like,
but it was not
oh
okay
my
in reading.
goodness, this is not easy. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Oh, and table of contents already can be so finicky. And then, oh, I feel your pain. Okay. I can't really see I can't pull up the chat as efficiently as I'd like to. Um, is there anybody else who wants to share? If not, I was gonna continue on. I can't see raised hands either very well.
I don't see any raised hands at the moment. Maybe,
Perfect.
yeah, and I can keep a chat. If a question comes through the chat, I'll let you know. Right now, we're just commenting, so maybe can let
Cool.
you know there. Okay.
Thank you. Okay. I love that. Thank you for sharing all of your horror stories in the chat and just sharing your stories with me because it makes me feel less alone. But so, and funnily enough, lots of accessibility vendors and companies still fall into this trap of this has simple content. It's going to be a simple fix. So I've worked on countless proposals where, federal agencies or maybe higher ed institutions are looking for, accessibility vendors to help them with their massive document libraries. So the typical conversation kind of goes something like this. The organization says, hey, we need somebody to help us make our documents accessible. Give us your pricing. And so accessibility companies will come back and say, hey, it depends. Some documents are simpler to fix and it's going to cost less. Others are more complex, take more time, and therefore cost more. More work, more cost. Other times, organizations are just going to flat out ask you to fill out their cost table for, transparency and for them to, weigh the apples between different vendors. So they're going to, on the screen, I have like the organization asking, here's a table for you to fill out. For generic documents, tell us how much it's going to cost per page for a simple generic document versus a complex generic document. Simple STEM versus complex STEM. I'm not sure what a simple STEM document would look like at the moment, but I took liberties. This is something that I saw from an institution putting out a proposal. I condensed it down, but this happens. This is out there. So what then happens is, as a response, documents then fall into buckets and are categorized into simple versus complex. So simple documents have straightforward layouts, mostly text. They're images with simple tables, and maybe they have a small number of pages. So on the slide, I have an example of a stereotypical simple PDF with just text like headings and one image. On the other hand, complex documents have, complex layouts and tables. They have more data visualizations. We have infographics, charts, maybe decision trees. There are fillable forms, STEM content, large number of pages. And then here's a stereotypical example of a complex PDF on the screen. It has a complex table with merged cells and there's STEM content inside it. So most remediation companies will kind of break down what kind of document falls under simple pricing versus complex pricing. And then they'll say, okay, in response to that, our simple documents cost, X dollars per page. Complex documents cost Y dollars per page. But what happens in the case, like I showed earlier with my kind of horror story PDF, where something I thought was simple turned complex? I think this categorization does make sense for larger companies with teams of remediators that can absorb the cost. My 20-minute estimate to 1.5 hour estimate. Maybe a larger company can absorb that time. But with most agencies that I work with, the people conducting remediation are staff who are asked to take on this additional duty, or more also very common is their accessibility teams of one person. And so something that you thought was going to take you 20 minutes, but then takes you an hour and a half, this eats into our time that's already, so limited. And that was just for these 2 pages, 2-page PDF. If we scale this up, something that we thought was going to take us a couple days could take us a lot longer. So really the problem is 2 documents can look identical in content, but take very different amounts of time to fix. So I started thinking, how do we teach people to dive a bit deeper when scoping effort? Because a client can describe their document as, well, it's a PDF that's mostly text. And, in the low effort scenario, yeah, it could be real text that is really easy to fix. Or the high effort scenario, it could be images of text. Or they can describe their document. This is short. It's a couple pages, and low effort. It has great tag structure. But then on the flip side, it could have terrible tag structure and, a lot of more effort and time into that. I've had clients also say it's just one table, and, one table could, be very quickly a quick fix, a simple table. But on the other side, I've also seen one table be a complex table that spans 20 pages. Like, yes, it is one table, but it is a very, very, very long table. So relying on description and content alone doesn't really tell you what type of effort you're going to have to put into it. So that brings me to estimating effort based on appearance might just surprise you. And on the screen, I'm a big Doctor Who nerd, but I have a Doctor Who meme of the 10th Doctor inside the TARDIS and the caption that says, "It's bigger on the inside." And sometimes with a PDF or even a website audit or an LMS, the amount of work is just bigger on the inside, substantially bigger on the inside. And you're kind of shocked walking in like, wow, this is massive. I didn't know I was walking into this. So there are 3 questions that I ask myself before I start to assess the work. Rather than estimating PDFs based on what is there or present, I recommend assessing based on what you know. So here are the 3 questions that I ask myself before I start. Question 1, what tools do I have? What do I actually have access to? Because the same document can take very different amounts of time depending on what you have. So if you have a licensed tool like Access PDF, Common Look, Made to Tag, that's going to help speed things up. Most of the time, and most of the clients I had worked for in the past, all we had was Adobe Acrobat. And so that was something to, bring up to leadership or PM on how long is this going to take you. It's like, well, with the tools we currently have, it's going to take me this amount of time. If I had access to other tools, this could be shortened by, 70%, but at least being upfront with them about that. For someone who's working on documents that their organization is creating internally, this probably will be straightforward and consistent because you're always going to know what tools you can have access to and what, is in procurement. But as consultants, we can be limited based on our clients' tools. There are different security measures and licensing policies that they have in place. Next question is, do I have the source file? And I believe, I can't remember your name, I'm sorry, but you had mentioned we don't have the source file, and you kind of joked about it, like how often, that would be best case scenario. But where was the document originally created in? Was it in PowerPoint, Publisher, Word? I saw people mention Canva in there and InDesign. And do I have access to that original file? If you have access to it, you can decide if it's faster for you, or I can decide if it's faster for me to fix things at the source, or if my only option is to manually repair the PDF structure. So what the source file does is it gives you more options, and you actually have more power to fix things in the source file where you might not be able to fix stuff even in the PDF. So in that case of the document I showed earlier, the source file for that PDF was created in Publisher. And for the client, Publisher was being deprecated and no longer supported by Microsoft. Also, the accessibility features within Publisher was minimal. So that brings me to another good point, that not all source file formats are made equal. Some source programs have more accessibility support than others, kind of like what Weston mentioned when he came off and he shared his story. They said, oh, maybe go back to Word and create it there. There is more features there. And some source programs will have more accessibility support than others. And if they have more support, it'll result in a cleaner PDF with minimal cleanup, whereas other source programs are going to require a lot more cleanup and tidying and remediation. And then third, the last question for assessing the work is, what's under the surface? What do I see when I take a quick look under the hood? Also, a great point I had mentioned earlier, I noticed that this was going to become a massive lift once I expanded everything and I kind of felt things were off. Another point that I want to make is, if I had turned on my screen reader software during my initial scoping and had quick listened and spot checked with NVDA or something, I would have noticed that all that text camouflaging themselves as images weren't being read aloud because they didn't have alt text or actual text assigned to them. So this is typically where hidden complexity shows up, is when you open it up, take a listen, spot check and spot scan underneath the surface. So what actually makes a PDF complex is not only the visible content that you can see, but the biggest traps are the hidden structure underneath. And so I have a picture of like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is that visible content that you can see. That's like, oh, this is complex because, there is STEM content on here, or the layout is a trifold brochure. But the hidden structure underneath can be massive underneath that surface, and can really be where that scope creep comes up. Before I get into the next section, actually, I know somebody had mentioned not having access to the source document. I'm kind of curious, how often, for those of you, even if you're not working on remediating, how often do you have access to the source file? I know, yeah, if you want to come off mute, almost never. Ooh. Ooh, I like that. Requiring it. I like that one. Mm-hmm. Carrie, that kind of brings me to that next question I was going to ask. Like, why do you think that is? Why is it so rare and such like a gem when you can have access to the source file? And sometimes I think it is like improper archival. Maybe the person who created it left and there's no permissions sharing. It's kind of that whole thing of like, if I won the lottery tomorrow, would people be able to pick up my work and find my source files, or is it locked on my local desktop? Um, yeah. Yeah, large organization, I think it gets lost between teams and institutions. There's, file management, version control. Sometimes you just, it was made accessible at one point, and then at some point, the the version that gets published around or shared is the inaccessible version because file naming or different conventions were not put in place to kind of manage that. And I think that's such a tragedy too. It's like when somebody's done the work, but due to poor version control or naming or filing, um, gets lost. Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody, for participating and sharing. Okay, so what happens next is scoping a document's effort. And I call this beware of the time traps. So, what are the things to watch out for when you scope a document's effort and kind of determine the time it's going to take you personally to complete this? So, on the screen, I have the TARDIS floating into a nebula of stars. What are the time traps that you could get stuck into? So the first time trap is my example, the images of text. Um, there's a screenshot on the slide of that same tag tree. It's expanded where there's images hidden within the paragraph tag. So when you have images of text, your remediation option, like option A, is optimal character recognition or OCR. And OCR is basically a software that looks at an image of text and tries to turn it back into real text. What it's doing, it's kind of looking for character distinction, what looks like a C versus, an O, but based on your scan or the font that this document was in, sometimes the C or C can look like an O to OCR. And so it helps. But it still requires manual review, and it helps users relying on screen readers once it's done, really well. But it is sufficient or insufficient, sorry, on its own. The reason being is because the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, has the success criteria images of text. So the problem with images of text, even when you can OCR them, is you're unable to faithfully zoom in on images of text and keep that high, crisp, clean resolution. If you zoom in on any image, after a while it gets blown out, pixelated, and you're unable to read it. So that also leads to users are unable to present or alter the text in a way that they prefer. If they want to increase the line spacing, or if they want to, zoom in, do high contrast mode, the things that would be available to them with real text isn't there with images of text. But OCR is an option. Second option of images of text is you could rebuild it, or you can retype the content into actual real text. So something I thought about while creating this presentation that I didn't think of when I worked on this horrible example, I think late last year, was leveraging AI. It honestly didn't even cross my mind to use AI to bring up to the client that this could be a way for them to recreate the source file in a program that has more accessibility features like Word. Or in their case, they were moving from Publisher to Canva, which I know everybody's like, Canva. So I had qualms about that I explained to them as well. But they had already purchased the license and they wanted to switch to Canva. So I was remediating their top, 10 PDFs, but they had hundreds more. So using and leveraging AI would have made some of that manual rebuild, retyping a little bit more feasible for their small content team. So what I actually did when building this presentation was I put it into Claude. So I have a reproduction of the prompt that I gave to Claude. I uploaded one of their PDFs raw into Claude, and I gave it this prompt: extract all text from this PDF, including text that exists only as images, put it in a Word document, use real heading styles for headings and real list formatting for the lists. Keep the wording exact, don't rewrite or fix anything. And it popped out a Word document with headings, with structure in there. Obviously, this needs manual review. This isn't saying, oh, this is such an easy fix. You just pop out with a perfect source file. Absolutely not. Depends on what kind of font you're using. They used a special serif font that there was some manual correction I needed to do, but for the most part, it spit out this 2-page PDF with all of the text, and so it was wonderful. I had actually started recreating and retyping everything when I did my recreation for removing the client content, I started retyping everything out because I'm still very manual like that, and realized I can do this. Ooh, there's a comment in chat that mentions you can export from Acrobat as accessible text to check OCR text and alt text on images. That's very cool. I love that. Yeah. But I thought this was a great way. If you do have to rebuild, maybe you don't have to retype everything. And how do we leverage AI in a way that doesn't remove the human and the manual review? Because I definitely think we still need people involved in this. And I don't trust AI quite yet. Okay, so I also like to show images of text. Like, what does that look like for an example? So here are some examples of text, images of text. And so I want to show the corresponding tags, what that looks like in the tag tree if you do come across something like this. For this one, this was work I did on a housing counselor course. They had these simple formulas throughout their documents. And in this instance, I had access to the source file. And I determined for me that it would be easy for me to retype these formulas in Word in real text. And I felt that I could do this quickly. There were I looked at all of them and it felt like it was doable. And it would fix it in the source for them. Second example, this is a figure of a diagram that also contained images of text. It's really small, but it's a safety checklist on common hazards to watch out for around your house. This diagram was actually created by a third party, an outside source. And so I had told the PM that for it to be truly accessible, I would need to, change this into real text and ensure that it met color contrast because it failed that too. But because I had open communication, the PM ensured me that we had budget and the time for me to do that. And so I think that also just goes to say, communicate with those project managers or the people who are asking you to do the work. Just be upfront, like for this to be truly accessible, because this is third party, either we ask this third party creator to remediate, which probably they're not going to do, but can document that and raise it up to them, or say, if you really want me to do this for the client, this is what I'm going to need.
Angelina, we have a
So then,
question. How did you
yeah.
fix the color only differentiation?
Okay. So there is, so I have this example of what I did in Word. I created, so the color isn't used alone. There is the text label there as well. So there's like initials for different parts of what is what. I added extra text labels in there and headers to kind of ground the user, and then create, I did a lot of stuff also. I'll show you in the next slide of how I tagged things too, so that it was being communicated to all users. But luckily for this example, I had the source document. So I was able to add more stuff into it, add a text alternative that follows. And so I was able to do more because I had that option of having the source file. If I had just had the PDF alone, I think my hands would have been tied and we would have to document it and raise it up. Like we need to find a different diagram, or talk to the vendor who created this diagram, etc. So in the end, this diagram had real text that could scale up cleanly. And then we met color contrast. We added, like I said, there was other pages to this I didn't want to include. And then this is the corresponding tag tree. So also having the source document gave me freedom to give more text, some headings, adding in structure for easier navigation for users to go between, different areas of the home. But what was really cool about this project is that the client had all source files. And like we kind of said, that's so rare that people even have that. And they asked me to estimate the time it would take to remediate both the source files and the PDFs. So they even carved out about 10 hours for me to do this intense detailed scoping, which I thought was amazing. So I wasn't under the pressure to quickly scan and provide an estimate on the spot, which sometimes I feel like we run into. Like, hey, can you tell me right now how long this is going to take you? 2 hours, three, and you're like, do you have the file? And some people are like, well, I don't have the file up front, but I can tell you it's pretty simple. I think that's where we run into that trap. And it's not just, consultants, it's everyone across the board, sometimes even with websites. It's like it's pretty straightforward, and then we're kind of pressurized to make decisions and give our estimate immediately. Another time trap to look out for is when everything is a paragraph tag. So there's no structure, no hierarchy, just paragraphs. And it doesn't have to be paragraph. I'm using paragraph as like, example, but if everything's just all one tag or, it's not correct, that's what I mean. So on this slide, I have a tag tree where everything is a paragraph tag. Some tags are empty, others have paths and images, so you know that they're not correct at all. So our remediation options here are, retagging everything so that the paragraph tags align with the appropriate structure, or reevaluating the source program, because sometimes it is the source program that is limited. It doesn't have capabilities to, tag all of the lists correctly, or, all the structure that's needed. Or sometimes you just need to rebuild and re-implement use of headings and build in that structure because it wasn't built in from the beginning. Any questions so far outside of just, I know there was a question just now about how I rebuilt it, but any general questions or anything? Nope. Okay. Okay. And then time trap number 3, the broken tag tree. So I kind of think of this as structure exists, but it's not usable. And that's because it's wildly out of order, or because tags do not match and do not align with what's like the content on the page. So on this screen, we have a tag tree where everything, seems okay. It's also kind of hard just to view from a tag tree without the visual layer. But some tags here are empty, others have paths and images, and it was broken. So an example of a broken tag tree in this document was a table for caregivers to fill out emergency and information for, I guess, childcare when they most recently did CPR training and different types of trainings. Caregivers were supposed to fill this content out in the material. So this is a table with lots of form fields within it. I clicked on the table tag, and what mapped was only the header row. So there's lots of tags inside here. There's, all the right elements. There's a table header, body, table row, all the right elements basically for a table to be structured, but nothing was mapped. And so I would have to go in and I mapped everything to the right cell and right form and all that. So this is kind of my example of what a broken tag tree looks like. And all of these are time traps. They're just good things to be aware of when you're scoping and looking at work to determine your level of effort. I really like this quote. It's by David Allen. He's an author and creator of the Getting Things Done methodology. And he says, you can do anything, but not everything. And let's be honest, we're all working with limited time, limited staffing, and often massive volumes of content. And part of sustainable accessibility work is learning how to prioritize effort responsibly, giving that accurate, feeling like you have that room to share how long it's going to take you to do something without feeling this pressure all the time. Because let's be real, burnout is so real in our industry, right? And so just knowing that you can do anything, but not everything. And that's just, our limitations as people with lives. Okay. So then this becomes the question of, I don't know why this thing is a little weird, but so at this point, the question is, what's the right decision? Do we fix it? Do we partially fix it based on limitations? This is third-party content. We document the rest. Do I rebuild this or do I push back? And by push back, it's not like I'm not going to do this at all. It's more of I'm going to need more time. I'm going to need more resources. Have we looked at alternative tools or software? What are the other options out there? And so if you have the source file, we can fix it at the source. That is ideal because not only are you fixing it in the source, that can be that template, for if you're revising it in the future, you have like an accessible foundation there. And then you can repair and re-export to PDF. If you don't have the source file, then we kind of have to see with what's under the hood. And then we kind of look into the tag tree. So we're going to start off with reviewing what's in the tag tree. If the tag tree shows real text, then we can ask ourselves, how is that tag structure? If it's poor, I'm going to say remediate the PDF. I mean, that is the best, that is the ideal output, right? Accessible content. And so even if the tag structure is poor, maybe everything's a paragraph tag, but if you're able to fix it all, an accessible PDF is ideal. In the case where it's poor and there is third-party content, you're not able to fix everything. I would partially fix and then document the remaining issues. And then the alternative to that is pushing back, bringing it up to somebody. This is going to take me significant more time than we originally thought. Do you still want me to proceed with this? Can we look at alternatives? Does this need to be a PDF? Asking some of those higher level questions on what can we do? Can you work with me here? If the tag structure is good, then that's pretty simple too. We just remediate the PDF. And like I said, if there's third-party content, that's why there's a dash line. It just means an alternative. We partially fix everything that we can and then document the rest. The second scenario, if the tag tree has images of text, we can OCR with careful review. And then we would then remediate the PDF, or we can rebuild the source, leveraging AI if possible. You rebuild the source, export the PDF again, you have a better foundation in the future going forward, and hopefully something cleaner in Adobe to, refine and edit and fix. And then lastly, if there are no tags, I like to leverage auto tag. That's in Adobe Acrobat. And so you can leverage the auto tag feature that it has. It will pop out with something. So it kind of brings you back, like, what did it tag? Was it real text that it found? Was it images of text? And kind of at least gives you a good starting place to go, especially if you are new to document remediation. And you're like, what is all this tagging stuff? Kind of helps you bring you back to the loop. And I think Nicole put the full decision tree in chat. So this is the document I showed earlier as far as its tag tree. I thought it was going to be simple. It was not. Before, it had images of text throughout. And then after, I gave it structure, added some actual text where it needed it as well. But it had structure now that people could navigate more efficiently and jump to. Yeah, it was definitely something that made me think about how I scoped and determined my level of effort. I think sometimes people think like, why should I know what these things look like? Why should I know what time traps, I'm calling them, look like? I like to think about it like the depth markers at a swimming pool. Like they don't stop anyone from swimming, but if like this area is 3 feet, that end of the pool is going to be 9 feet. They just tell you what you're about to swim into so that you can decide. And that's what these time traps are. I've trained a lot of people who feel really solid on the basics, and I've always shied away on showing beginners the advanced stuff. I mean, some of this terminology I talked about today was kind of like, if you don't know what tags are, probably was overwhelming. Um, I typically just focus on remediation techniques that are, approachable and make it easy to integrate into your daily workflow. And I never want to scare people who are learning. But what I found was during office hours, participants would come in confused. I'm like, hey, we learned these techniques and I got them when we were doing our workshop, but they're not working now. And honestly, they'd hit a time trap and get completely confused and really discouraged. Most of the oftentimes, like, I don't think I'm getting this, and we're kind of beating themselves up. But in reality, they hadn't failed. They just ran into work that needed maybe more tools or was a little bit higher on like the remediation skills, or frankly, sometimes their documents were just terrible and it wasn't them. So after lots of office hours, I started thinking about how we should start showing and sharing those time traps and red flags, not to scare anyone off, but because recognizing it gives you something to better advocate for yourself and say, this is advanced. It's going to take me 5 or 6 more hours, or maybe 2 to 3 more days than I had initially anticipated, or just frankly say, I don't have the skills yet. What are our options? And I think that's just realistic scoping. So, some key takeaways. One, documents can be misleading. Structural and visual content both together affect effort. Assess your work by starting with what you have and what you have in front of you, your tools. If you have the source file, what are the knowns? And then lastly, ask and advocate for yourself. That's what I really want everybody to take away from this, is like understanding, okay, I need to just have the tools so I know what's ahead of me. Um, yeah, that leads to the end of the presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Let's make sure to thank you, Angela. Angelina, that was amazing. Sorry. I'm clapping and talking and doing all the things and trying to also remind you to put your information, drop your information into the chat because we don't have the slides just yet. So I don't know if they'll be able to grab your LinkedIn and your email, but you are a wealth of knowledge and just so wonderful to work with that I want everyone to be able to connect with you. Like I said in the beginning, we've partnered for a project and it was fabulous. So I did the PowerPoints, Angelina did the PDFs, and we cranked those out. So thank you for sharing all this knowledge here today. So does anyone have any questions for Angelina before we wrap up? Lots of thank yous, lots of hearts, lots of clapping. Well done. There's a comment in the chat, and we have a raised hand from Weston.
I just have a quick question. What resources would either of you recommend for someone who's brand new to document remediation? I often feel like I go to YouTube, which is helpful, but any other resources would be really helpful to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of resources that I really like as far as explaining the basics of document remediation. I do like the accessibility guy on YouTube. I like some of my mentors in accessibility. Definitely check out WebAIM. Sometimes it doesn't get into like the nitty gritty, and I'm somebody who learns by doing, and I almost wish like in this remote environment that somebody could watch me remediate and be like, yeah, that looks good, or oh, here's another technique you could do. And so I feel like I missed that. WebAIM, I think April mentioned in chat, a great resource too. I also, some of my accessibility mentors, I'd say in document remediation, are CPACC. They have such good trainings. They are a wealth of knowledge on nuanced stuff too. I'm trying to think of what's free and open source though right now, and personally I'm kind of drawing a blank. I don't know if anybody
I
else
put
has.
the Angela, I put the 508. There's some videos. They have some free resources. I dropped it in. I don't
Okay.
know if that's any help.
Ooh. Jen also mentions LinkedIn Learning self-paced courses. I think that's done by, is it Chad Chilius? And he's part of CPACC. I've used those. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. I think also if you're working in Word, some of their documentation, it's very simple, but it'll get you started for somebody who's not used to using, heading styles or, all the different features.
Great question. Are there any other questions at this time?
I see Carrie's question. What about the ADS body of knowledge document? I found the ADS, it's been a while. I think I took it last year, so I'm trying to recall what was in the book of knowledge or body of knowledge. Um, but I think they were more principles rather than how to do the technical stuff. If like, it didn't tell you, like, okay, this is how you change a tag, this is how you create a new tag. I think it more so went overall document accessibility principles. Um, yeah, rather than the nitty gritty technical how to do the work.
There's a few more here in the chat. I don't know if you can grab those. And there's one up higher up too by April. What is your experience with the quality of did we get this Acrobat's auto tagging? Has it been helpful? I have had it be helpful sometimes and other times not. Any tips?
Yes. I feel like it is hit or miss. Depends on the document, right? Sometimes I've tagged it one way and it'll look pretty good. And then I've had a colleague auto tag and it looks slightly different. So I'm not sure why that is. But I think for the most part, if you're starting with no tags at all, it's such a beginner friendly way to start. And at least leverage that so you're not starting from nothing and you're manually tagging everything. I like to at least see what it's outputting and then make that determination like, this is pretty good. I have the time to fix this. Or wow, this is absolute garbage. I would rather start over. But it gives you options, right? It's for you to make that decision. I feel like I'm not catching up with the chat, so
Yeah. We've
let's see
got
another.
um so we've got quite a few here. I
Okay.
think um we just I think we no, I think we got all the ones above. Anyone that wants to come off mute if we forgot it. But there
Yeah.
is a new one here too, just about from Jen, newbie, but what does a document tag look like when you save a Word doc to a PDF? I don't know if you have time for that one with the 3 minutes we have left, but yeah.
It depends. There's also a way to properly export a document from Word to PDF, and never print to PDF because you lose all of your tags, all the accessibility work you built in from, Microsoft Word. If you don't have the right export settings, there is a way to lose all of your work. But if if you're doing it correctly, and you have an accessible Word document, it translates and you get those tags pretty correctly. Um, but yeah, it looks pretty good.
We did have a question about besides the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and the IAAP, which is the I never remember where we get our certification from, but the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. Did I get it?
Yes, yeah.
Would if besides those, is there anything else that you would recommend in this area?
As far as, let's see, provide professional organizations you recommend. In as far as certifications or companies, I like DQ. I reference lots of their stuff for website things. WebAIM, great organization as far as like a lot of resources that I refer back to consistently. If we're talking documents, I listen to CPACC, their podcast about their document specialists. So I follow them a lot. The accessibility guy, as far as documents. Yeah, hope
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with other organizations, but if anybody is, please let us know.
Yeah.
Okay, lots of great questions, lots of great conversation, really informative, lots to unpack. Thank you so much, Angelina. Um, And I'm just going to drop that we have one more in the series, Beyond Alt Text, making complex STEM visualizations accessible at scale. Maybe they can present, and then Angelina, you can show them how to make that PDF that they're about to create after accessible. But I'm going to put that in the chat, and we hope that you join us for that final session. That's a topic that everybody wants to hear. But this was fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.